In this week's Spotlight, we're rolling out the brand new GI Joe Classified A.W.E Striker, a modern upgrade to one of the Joe's most iconic early recon vehicles. From comparisons to vintage classic, to display ideas, to Crankcase himself, this one is jam-packed. Fire it up and hit the field, only at Heroic Nonsense. Let's go. Totally excited to be bringing you this week's awesome spotlight for the GI Joe Classified A.W.E Striker with Crankcase. I couldn't wait to get my hands on this one, even with the slightly updated design changes, and I have to say, aside from a few minor misses, this is a great version of Crankcase and the A.W.E Striker for the GI Joe Classified line, and surprisingly big. Not only that, but there are tons of ways to display both Crankcase and the A.W.E Striker, all of which I'll explore in detail, with some ideas definitely being outside of the box. So please stick around for this action-packed review with tons of content from comparisons, to a look back to the original, to a deep dive into sculpt and design. And if you're into this kind of multi-layered and insightful GI Joe spotlights, please like and subscribe. It only takes a second, but it's totally appreciated. So when I first saw the Classified A.W.E Striker renders, I thought to myself, something is off. It doesn't completely look like the original. It definitely looks cool, but why didn't they go for an exact replica of the iconic 80s version? Well, this is GI Joe Classified, and as we know, the devs like to mix things up a bit by pulling ideas from both real-world vehicles and the classic designs. After a bit of digging, it became clear to me that this exactly fits into that mission. Ultimately, this appears to be heavily inspired by the US Army Chenoweth dune buggy, mixed in with some design cues taken from the original 80s A.W.E Striker, and I'm totally here for it. It really does look like an updated, real-world version of what the A.W.E Striker should be, from long, slender design to weapon systems to vehicle accessories like the front bumper and back cage. The wheels are exquisitely designed, especially the back ones, which are nice and bulky and definitely give it an off-road appeal. You also have the side mesh bar, which is also accurate to both the original and the real-world version. True to form, the sidebar can be used to house things like the cartridge box and extra fuel tank. One complaint though is the terrible soft rubber they use for the weapon here, which unfortunately makes keeping the barrel straight almost impossible. Another thing that bugged me were the smaller wheels they used for the front. Not sure why they did this, as the original and the Chenoweth version generally have the same size wheels across the four. The front is nice and sleek, probably even sleeker than the 80s version, but bulked up a bit by the hood element, which I like, a callback to the original as well. Plus that great US Army star front and center with nice military styled writing for the United States decal. You can see how they weathered the paint to give it a more realistic feel. Love the front bumper with light bar with a working winch. A couple different size lights on this big front bar makes the A.W.E Striker look more imposing. You'll note that I haven't really shown the passenger compartment roll cage yet, as I prefer this more accurate 80s looking version. You can also see some of the stickers my boys placed on the side of the A.W.E Striker, which is something you can do. I'll show the types of stickers it comes with later on. Crankcase fits in nice and snug, and happy to say doesn't look out of place. Most figures do generally fit in fine. The roof has a more modern selection of weapons as compared to the original, complete with a machine gun and 2 anti-tank tow missile launchers. This is again accurate to the Chenoweth real-world version. I'd have to say that the back is probably the most true to form when compared to the original A.W.E Striker, with some great decals and that very characteristic style, with some more nicely designed lights wrapped in some caging. You can also see the pegs, which can be used to place some GI Joe figures, which we'll see in a bit. Something unique to this vehicle as compared to the VAMP and Stinger, the wheels can turn, which gives it some playability but also some great display options. From the driver's perspective, you get a highly detailed interior with a digital map system and some great vehicle displays, as well as the original steering wheel design. And from the other side, you can see the stick shift and handbrake, as well as a CB, which is on some plastic, which allows it to be held and displayed by the driver or passenger. A close-up here of the tow missile system, one on each side of the roof, each housing a removable tow missile, which can be placed into the launcher all the way in with the tip showing or with it shooting out for a more action-styled look. Something I forgot to include in most of the images, the gas tank, which can peg into either side of the A.W.E Striker. Now let's shift from the traditional look to the more realistic modern look by taking the roll bar and seat and slotting them into the back, which takes the A.W.E Striker from this to this, and from a different angle. So for those of you wanting a real-world version of the A.W.E Striker, well, you get that option. And while not my preferred look, it is accurate and can house a machine gunner for some extra firepower. Though technically the roll cage should go up over the gunner's head, but I think we can let it slide in this case. Which version would you display it in, the 80s inspired one or a modern update? The Ostriker does have a hook in the back, which means it can pull the GI Joe MMS shown here, which we haven't opened yet. So instead, I'll show you what it looks like with the HMS, which is essentially the same thing. And it actually looks pretty cool. I'm excited to open up the Joe version and see how it ultimately looks. But in the end, I think we'd keep it with the VAMP given it makes more sense for that Jeep to tow it. Overall, I love the Ostriker. I'm now totally used to the longer body design and even the wheels have grown on me. I know there are some third parties that have builds for this, but if you don't want to go that route, I still think this is a must-have for anyone's collection. Now let's move on to the man of the hour himself, Crankcase. And as far as Joe drivers go, he's my favorite to date. Always liked his lighter sand-colored tones, and I think this desert gear look works perfectly. Some nice interplay between the color used for his chest and the rest of the suit with beiges and browns. I think they did a fantastic job with his head sculpt. Looks exactly what I feel Crankcase should look like, and with a nice 80s feel to it. Even though he does sport a more modern haircut. Not many patches on him, but this Joe Star one sticks out nicely against the beige. He has a nice holster and removable handgun on one side, and a sheath and knife for his leg on the other side. Where he truly shines though is with all of the accessories he comes with, including multiple face and neck coverings and helmets, with some other fun accessories thrown into the mix like the Joe coffee mug. Lots of ways to display him as a result, so let's go through them one by one. Starting with his cap with the words off-road printed on it for those downtime periods. He also has this well-designed face covering, which I ended up using for a different figure, which I'll showcase shortly. While the cap might not look the best on its own, it actually looks quite good combined with a face mask. Crankcase also comes with a more standard helmet, a callback to his original one, which can be combined with both the goggles and face mask to give it a very cool sand dune kind of look. This look also works for his capped version when those heavy sandstorms are on the horizon. And finally, a third helmet, taken from the Cobra ferret drivers, which looks really good as well, and makes perfect sense for the driver of an open-aired off-road vehicle. Though again, I decided to use it for someone else. That being my second breaker figure that came with the Ram and whose head has been replaced with an extra one I have of Duke. This helmet fits way better on Duke's head and totally works for a random Ram grunt. Better than the one that came with Breaker, which works well for him but not necessarily as good with Duke's head. Another accessory that I really like, the handkerchief version of the face mask that goes around his neck. Makes the helmet look better as well. And my favorite accessory, the Joe coffee mug, which even has a place in the Ostriker, which comes with correctly sized coffee holders. And finally, some binoculars to look for Cobra in the distance, something I'll use in some cool display ideas at the end of this review. Alright, let's move on to the comparison section, which I was totally stoked for since I finally got to pull out my other similarly toned vehicles. I love having two mid-sized Jeep type vehicles to showcase now together. But let's start first with a comparison to the biggest ground vehicle we currently have, the HasLab HisTank, and I'm really liking the scale of these two next to each other. Even better though, the VAMP next to the Ostriker. I think it's great that we're truly starting to build up a range of ground vehicles for the Joes. Some Rams to also give an idea of scale and how they look all together, which again looks great. You can also see what I mean here regarding Breaker's helmet being a bit too bulky on Duke's head. And finally, the HMS system, since we didn't open up our Joe version yet. Let's see now how they look from the side, and again, I think they scale great, and this also gives you an idea of the feel of the updated Ostriker's look. Wish the tires were all the same size though. VAMP versus Ostriker, what do you guys think, and which do you prefer? Let us know in the comments section. Ram looks great next to the Ostriker in any configuration. And finally, the HMS for sake of completion. But we can't leave the biggest Joe vehicle out of this comparison. And these two scale pretty well, especially from this angle. I feel that images never do the reality justice, and in person you can really appreciate the size difference. But still, I think you get a good idea of how these two would look like next to each other in your collection. But putting them all together is where this really shines. I mean, this is exactly how I remember putting my 1/18 scale toys together, and now that we have a much wider variety of classified vehicles, I'm starting to get that same feeling again. Wonder what the next mainline non-HasLab Joe vehicle will be. Place your bets here. Alright, let's finally see how it compares to the original, using my anniversary version here as I don't have the original 80s one. And right off the bat, you can see the main differences in size, wheel choice, and accessories. I'd say that the 80s Ostriker sports the more accurate, thinner front, though it's much shorter in length, and I really miss those big wheels in the front. The weapons are also different, with the classified version opting for the more realistic modern military look. Not sure which I prefer, though would have been nice to get both options. Another angle which highlights the thinner front of the 80s version. On that point, I much prefer the classified version, which has a winch and also comes with a much bigger light bar with many more lights. Nice to see some of the Ostriker design elements used here, specifically on the front hood portion with that shield design. With another look here at the weapon systems, also showcasing here that sci-fi-esque laser from the 80s, which I'm fine not having for the classified version. Much prefer the realistic machine gun. And as I explained earlier, the backs are almost identical, again, this part being the most faithful to the original design. Overall, a nice update to the original and one that combines both new and old elements. I'd have to see what a truly faithful adaptation would look like to make any final judgment of which would be better, but appreciate having a more realistic real-world version to add to our collection. And a bonus, since I can't seem to find my 118 Crankcase, crossover Bumblebee who transforms into the Ostriker. You can see how good the transformed Bumblebee looks in my review of the Thunder Machine / Soundwave crossover spotlight, linked here and below. Now for some real fun, a ton of display ideas using the Ostriker and Crankcase, way more than I thought I'd have going into this. And we'll start with a shot of the 3 early GI Joe era vehicles and their drivers hanging out, which makes for an awesome display. I just absolutely love having this era of vehicles in classified form set up like this. Brings back great memories of doing the same thing when I was a kid. But there are definitely ways of making it more dynamic, and of course throwing in the HasLab Dragonfly. This one is of the Joes getting some quick R&R before their next mission, with Crankcase relaxing on the hood of his Ostriker, and Breaker grabbing a cup of Joe leaning up against his Ram motorcycle. If you want to display the Ostriker on its own with Crankcase, I highly recommend this one. I really like this one of Crankcase standing on the back of his Ostriker looking through his binoculars for any signs of Cobra on the horizon. And to make it a bit more interesting, why not add in Dusty keeping an eye out while leaning up against the side of the Ostriker waiting for Crankcase's assessment. Another fun one is of Crankcase drinking some coffee as he waits for a communication from Hawk for his next mission. This is just such a cool look for a display. I really don't know which I'd prefer, this one or the previous one. Just something about this shot that makes you feel good. A guy in his vehicle drinking a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise. And threw this in for fun since we now have a Joe mug and Joe cereal that came with Starduster that can be displayed together. We saw earlier how a figure could fit into the back of the Ostriker with the official seat and roll cage set up. But in this shot I wanted to have the original 80s look with someone manning the machine gun. So I came up with this, which I think looks fantastic, gives the display a real sense of urgency and action. All it takes is to place the hands tightly onto the machine gun handles and bend one leg up onto the side of the Ostriker while the other goes into the vehicle. Also wanted to highlight my use for the face mask. I feel it makes Dusty look way better, as I was a bit disappointed with how Dusty came out when we first got him. Something about that oversized helmet. An always fun display idea with the Jeeps is one using the tow hooks. And so I had to show it here since we now have a good range of vehicles to use it with. As for a simpler, cleaner look for your Ostriker, you can always take off the weapons, which gives a more 80s vibe to it. You can even take the roll bar off altogether. Not sure I like this look, but it does give off an early Willys Jeep look to it, and maybe something you think looks cool, especially if you have some multiples. A completely innovative take on this look, adding the double guns and turret from the VAMP onto the back of the Ostriker without the roll cage. Kinda Mad Maxy. Now let's head into a more action-based display idea, using the whole group of vehicles here, speeding into battle together against Cobra, while also adding in some extra figures and vehicles, including one of my favorites, General Hawk speaking over the CB radio. And there's our second VAMP, which definitely bulks up this vehicle unit. Another fun one is a more formation-based display using our vehicles. I really like symmetry, and if this is the only room you have to display them together, then I say go for it because it also looks great. This one is a fun one using the turning wheel mechanism of the Ostriker, with Crankcase spinning the Striker around to get away from two stingers heading straight for them. You can also use that mechanism to make it look like the Ostriker is breaking off from formation to head back to grab those stingers attacking this mobile unit. If you have a few VAMPs or Ostrikers, a nice simple display is of them driving together like this. The two main Joe off-road Jeep type vehicles just look so good together, it's simple and effective. But adding in some Rams definitely doesn't hurt, and makes for a really nice action-based display. This car showroom type look is also a nice option. We do sometimes like to display our vehicles this way as well, though I think I might for now include the Ostriker in a more action type display. And here's another slightly modified way to display a second figure on the back of the Ostriker, with both legs mostly placed inside the Ostriker with the second leg slightly raised and resting on the seat in front, which allows for the second figure to have a more forward-facing setup. And finally, some shots using the pegs located all over the vehicle, which takes a bit of work but can actually look quite good. If you have any other ideas, share below. I really like this front image, full of action, in the desert, and with multiple Ostrikers in different configurations. And is that the bridge layer I see in the background? Nice side art showcasing Crankcase using his binoculars, with the back showcasing all the accessories and vehicle with Crankcase in tech spec format. As promised, the types of stickers you can use for your Ostriker, a shark, dragon, and dog, looks like the dog thing from Neverending Story. Weird choice in my opinion. And finally, the specs booklet, which covers the various parts of the vehicle and how to put it all together. Always fun to have an instructions booklet like from the good old days. So that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed this in-depth look at Crankcase and his Ostriker. Is this on your must-have list? Let us know. Still have a lot more Joe spotlights coming up, so make sure to keep an eye out for those. Yo, Joe. Thanks for watching, and remember, it's all such heroic nonsense in the end.
Transform!